there's a continuing question that arises in Scripture, and it's about what's the relationship we have with the animal kingdom. And I don't know that I have all the exact answers, but I think a pretty good case can be made for that since we're all God's creatures, okay, we all have some divine purpose in life. And so therefore, there's good, I think, documentation in Scripture that pets do have some salvation, have some souls. I know some people would disagree with me, but I think it's a fair place to start. So the question we'll try to answer is, what do you think? I think we know how some people feel. Patty, you said, if I don't have the right answer, you're leaving. Right? And then the real question is, does God's plan for eternity include the non-human world? And that's a fair question, I think, especially today. And my favorite is, how do you answer children when they ask, will I see Theo or Blinky or Ralph or Charlie? Will I see them in heaven or won't I? And children do ask those questions. And some of them have some really good answers. And is all of creation intended to be saved or just us? There's this wonderful prayer from St. Francis, which I like. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled, but to console. To be understood is to understand. To be loved is to love. For it is in the giving that we receive. It is in the pardoning that we are pardoned. And the dying that we are born to eternal life. Isn't that a wonderful prayer? It just kind of sums it all up. So these are our pets throughout life. Upper left-hand corner, a little cat named Winky, who we had in Hampton Bays back in the 70s. And then next to him, Puffy. And Puffy and the German Shepherd, who we called Sherman, grew up together. The Sherman weighed 140 pounds. And he was a bit of a runner, so if he got out, he'd go around the neighborhoods stealing steaks off of people's barbecue, digging up trees on the run in the backyard. And then another cat who didn't survive. And this white cat over here, called Shammy, is really fascinating. I hired an executive secretary at GD, and she said, I only got one problem. The apartment we're staying in, I can't keep my cat, so I'll take the job if you take the cat. So we took the cat, and the cat had some serious health problems, and we wound up giving her intravenous fluid and trying to keep her alive and subcutaneous fluid. But she was a great pet. And this monster over here, this 23-pound black and white one, was Nina's cat at the marina. And he would go hang out on the docks and wait for people to come in. And if they had fish in the boat, he'd jump in the boat, grab a flounder, and take the whole flounder with him. And this is then more contemporary. This is Toby on the right, who you saw last night, who was here if you were here. A cat that we lost some months ago. And so this has been our pets. And then there's, and I'm sure all of them will go to heaven. But, and by the way, here's Toby, the pastoral care dog that you all know. Okay? But I'm not so sure about Teddy. Not so sure about Teddy. Because Teddy likes to kill crows. He's wiped out entire sparrow communities. And he's just a little bit of a monster, so we couldn't bring him last night. Okay? So the question is, can the case be made that all creatures will be in paradise with us? And I think there's some good examples from Scripture and our Judeo-Christian community that that's true. So we heard a little bit about St. Francis from the back of the bulletin, right? This morning. So I don't think we have to go through all of that. But he had an interesting life. Born in 1182, he was carefree and very generous, liked to party a lot, okay? He was imprisoned, decided that that life wasn't for him and he wasn't very good at it. And so he went off and he started a ministry taking care of people. And of course, from that came what order?
The Order of St. Francis.
Yeah, the Franciscans. Very few, particularly in that day, folks, and even today, subscribed to the Franciscans because it was so difficult to conform. It was so difficult to do what he did. But of course, his claim to fame is repair my house, which was falling into ruin. What's interesting about him, you probably know this, he's one of my favorite saints of the church, and of course, his patron city is Assisi, okay, where you probably would, if you haven't been there, it's a fabulous place, you know, in Italy. But he never became a priest. He was always a deacon. Just thought I'd mention that. Just thought I'd mention that.
Once a deacon, always a deacon.
No, not always. Once a permanent deacon, always a deacon. Once a transitory deacon, only temporarily a deacon until you become a priest. And if you want that, that's confusing enough, I know.
No, in your heart.
In your heart.
Once you're a deacon, you're always a deacon.
Yes, yes. There was another famous deacon in the church too, which we could talk about one day, and it was Copernicus, who was the first one to resolve orbital mechanics, that the planets revolved around the sun and not that the center of the earth was the center of the universe. Another deacon. See the things that happen with deacons? The good things? So Francis was really quite a servant of the church. He called all of his creatures brothers and sister moon, okay? And he believed that all creatures were part of God's family, that we were all part of the family of God, okay? And he wrote the canticle for the creatures in these prayers like we just heard previously, okay? And he believed that we are not meant to journey with God alone. And he was canonized and made a saint in the 12th century. So when we looked for someone who represented the animal kingdom and creatures in the church, it was clearly Francis. And here's the canticle for the creatures, which you can take with you, the canticle for Brother Sun. Now, some believe creatures won't go to heaven. And what are the arguments for that? The arguments are a life with God after death is only possible for the baptized. What do you think? Maybe yes, maybe no. But if you think about how many people in the world are not baptized, and where baptism is not part of their sacramental ritual, whether you're Jewish or whether you're a Muslim or whether you're a Hindu, although they have some similarities in their culture, would it mean that if those people live a life that's righteous and good and believe in God, that they would not be founded as well? They would not be saved as well? Kind of a pretty narrow view of God if we begin to do that. Others believe that only humans have intelligence and free will. And animals don't have souls, so they can't possibly be saved. And that said, there's a lot of people, including me, who thinks God has a broader view of the kingdom, just like God has a broader view of religions, okay? And they have a way of life given to them by the Creator. A bird sings a chorus. A dog rests with those in need, like you talked and preached about this morning. And to love those creatures and those... Come on and sit down, guys. And those creatures bring us love and they bring us hope. Or a cat purrs on your lap. Did you know there are even pets who could detect cancer in people?
Yes.
I mean, pretty amazing, all right? And you think about the dogs that do, the service dogs that go into nursing homes and heal people and what have you. We've been found that pets can actually lower our heart rate and lower our blood pressure. Sometimes they raise it though. They can lower it. So what's that role of them in that kingdom? Okay? But let's look at Genesis. In the beginning of Genesis, we see creation takes 7 days. And finally, in 131, we read, God saw everything that he had made, and it was good. It doesn't say everything like man only, and it was good. Everything was good. Right? So everything is in God's kingdom. So this is, I think, a good argument for God's desire that all creatures, okay, are created this way. And would not God's very decision to create with the universe that dwell within imply an unwritten covenant between God and creation? What's a covenant? Yeah, a covenant is an agreement, particularly a royal covenant from those days, an agreement between God or between a royal person, okay, that cannot be broken. So this was God's, oh, here's one here. Oh, look at this. What's her name?
Lucy.
Hi, Lucy. Bring Lucy up here so we can get Lucy on this camera. Come on. Come on, I gotta bring Lucy up here. She's the most darling, cutest thing we've seen yet today.
She's going to need to sign a waiver to go on.
Oh, look at this. Here's, come over here. Hi, everyone. This is Lucy. How you doing, kiddo?
Made me do
She's a little quiet sometimes.
How old is she?
4 years.
She's 4. This is Lucy, everybody.
Hello.
She's very, very cute. Thanks for coming. Thanks, Lucy. I love her leash. And when we read in the Gospel of John that God is love, that's Mark and Marco's and Maya's and Kate's dog. And he's a Wheaton. He's a terrier. And he acts just like a terrier. Typical. So when we read in the Gospel of John that God is love, don't we read that, understand that God is love for all creation, right? Not just God is love for a man or for women or for certain creatures. God is love for all creation. And so if you love someone in all creation, you can easily take that forward and say that we're all created to be loved by God. Does that make any sense?
Yes.
Lucy, what do you think? Finnegan, what do you think? Miss Finnegan.
I think he's getting some exercise before the service.
So when we look at Genesis, we see that God's creation, there's inherent goodness and beauty in all of creation. And surely creation would not have included just us, that it would have had to include everybody, particularly the Garden of Eden. All right? The Garden of Eden is a glimpse of paradise to come. Okay, and don't we see in the Garden of Eden, in that restoration, all the animals and all the kingdom? Again, they're not separated against. They're all integrated together. So, if they're in the Garden of Eden with, and we know it's metaphorical, with Adam and Eve, why wouldn't they be in the garden in some other dimension in some future life with us? Why would they be excluded? What do you think? Would they be excluded? Would a loving God of all exclude them? Might exclude someone like Teddy. Poor Teddy.
Poor Teddy.
Poor Teddy. And in 1 Corinthians, we see that the Garden of Eden is a metaphor for final paradise. Okay? And then we read in Genesis, it's not good for man to be alone. I will make him a helper, and out of the ground the Lord formed every animal in the field and every bird in the air to see what they would be called, and man called them by name. There's this thing about equality, right, between the animal kingdom and us. Who knows about Richard Kipling's book and movie? You know? Jungle Book. Who's seen Jungle Book? Good, great. Well, if you've seen Jungle Book, you know what the story's about, right? It's about a man-child who's raised by a leopard and lions in the jungle. And the roles are reversed. And there's a rather vicious lion who wants to kill him, and he's protected as he goes through this early part of life. And there's a wonderful line in it that I just love. The strength of the pack is in the wolf. The strength of the pack is in the wolf. And the strength of the wolf is in the pack. Think about that. When you think about community and church, it's the same kind of metaphor, isn't it? The strength of the church is in each of you. And the strength of each of you is the church. Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that cool? So if you haven't seen Jungle Book, you can get it on HD DVD, and it's terrific. It's very visual. It's stunning visually. So I suggest you go take a look at that, because I think it makes this case pretty well. What do we read in Isaiah? After the Messiah's mission is complete, the wolf shall be the guest of the lamb. So in eternity, the lamb and the wolf, which is the metaphor, come together. And the leopard shall live with the kid. The calf and lion shall lie together with a child to guide them. Doesn't that also imply some long-lasting, eternal relationship? Right? So this is a view, as I see it, of paradise regained, when the peace of Eden is restored with all creatures. That makes sense to you guys? Anyway? And what about dominion? God is said to have dominion over every creature, all the creatures, right? And dominion means to imitate God's style of the Creator. And how does God do that? He watches over creation. He watches over the dominion, well, God does, okay? And it means in early biblical times to care. So it really very much implies that God cares for, as we are called to care for all of creation. Right? And does that make sense? So there again, you see that the creation of animal kingdom, all creatures and us, is much more held closely together than some people might think. And it's just like Francis, he wanted to live in dominion with all of creation. Let's look at Noah. If God wouldn't want us to live in dominion and concert with all of creation for eternity, why bother saving all of creation? Why bother? Does that make any sense to anyone? Right? Otherwise, you would just save mankind. And we see, and what about the dove that's sent out to find land? He or she saved Noah's bacon, right? And so that dove, that creature, was sent out to find land and come back to save, basically, metaphorically, all of mankind. And we would see from that, take the lesson away, that both humans and creatures are meant to work together. And think about the new covenant. What is the sign of the new covenant that God will never destroy the earth again? It is the rainbow. Right? And that rainbow applies to all of creation, not just to some of us. Right? So I think there's, again, a good argument there as well. And in Jonah, story of Jonah, furious storm at sea, the sailors throw Jonah into the water. They discover that Jonah caused the storm. He tries to run away. God calls him to preach to Nineveh. Okay? The fish saves him, basically, doesn't eat him, essentially. Okay? And he goes on to preach. There, the working together of both the creatures of the sea and this big fish helps Jonah to rise above his bitterness and return to God. Has a pet, I bet it's true of all of you, ever help you to rise above some problem, to find some peace? You preached about it this morning. Think about service dogs. You think about that blessing and what they do. We often forget about that. But here's another wonderful example of God's creation being everyone in creation. Now there's some really good, I wish I had, anybody got a prayer book? You got one? Psalm 104 is based on, and 148. Psalm 148 is the hymn of all creation. I should have brought a prayer book over. Why would you not do that? You know, why would you save all those creatures? That we're all part, and that's the key point, we're all part of God's creation. All part of God's creation. Even Teddy. I had a good picture of Teddy, but the file got lost. The incarnation. What's the incarnation? Jesus coming to us, becoming human, being incarnated in us. That's the central mystery of Christianity. And Jesus delighted in using images of nature in everything he did. If you look at a lot of his parables, they always relate back to nature. Remember this, the birds of the air and the lilies of the field. Right? Jesus is always using those kind of parables from nurturing his stories. Okay? So he populated his sermons and his parallels about creation, about all of creation, which I find fascinating. And then look what happens in Mark at the resurrection. Jesus says, go into the world and proclaim the gospel to every creature. Doesn't say just to man, to every creature. Right? We're all creatures of God. Right? So you don't see this separation like this so much. If you look at it from the perspective, you know, we're all created in the image of God. And we all have value in the image of God. And it's important for us all, as all of creation, to take care of each other in the image of God.
There's those stories I was reading about St. Francis actually preaching to birds.
Preaching to birds of the air. He would. He would. Matter of fact, how much do you think animals or these creatures understand? I mean, it's amazing what some of them understand in their vocabulary, right? Especially certain storks. I mean, they're just incredible. And how they can actually form as a community. You know, crows have a very high degree of communal socialization. So here's a true story, Maya. About 2 months ago, we're having a little dinner party at the house, and I hear my wife Nina yell out, "Oh my God!" That's a biblical phrase.
Yeah.
So she goes outside, and all the crows, hundreds of them, are circling over our house. Because the crows go over to Lake Hodges. I live by Lake Hodges in the late afternoon. And one of the crows had come down, seen Teddy, and dive-bombed him, and then took off again. Another crow did it. That crow wasn't so lucky. Teddy grabbed the crow out of the air. All 18 pounds of him. So here's now this crow that's dead. All the crows circling 20 feet above our house, and Teddy comes into the house with black feathers out of both sides of his mouth. For a week, those crows would not let him alone. They hung out in the trees. They hung out in the neighborhood. If he went outside, they constantly, but not so close this time, made a whole racket to make sure that they knew that he was there. It's amazing. Now that was some kind of social behavior, right? Right? Isn't that amazing?
And of course you buried the bird, right?
Bird is buried.
Bird is I'm proud of you.
A lot of stuff's buried on our property.
Oh, yeah.
Little pet cemetery back there.
Pet cemetery
Yeah,
of
okay.
Escondido. And in
No doubt.
And in Revelation we hear, then I heard every creature in heaven. Revelation 5:13. Think about that with words. Every creature in heaven and on earth and under the sea and everything in the universe cry out, to the one who sits on the throne and to the Lamb be blessing and honor, glory and might forever and ever. So if you ask kids why they think pets would join us in heaven, here's the kind of things they say. they provided, 8th graders provided the following answers, and this is probably the best logic of all. If they didn't go to heaven, who would take care of them? Reasonable thing to say. So they can be with their owner who loves them. Right? Because it's the only place to go if they are good. I don't know about the ones that are bad. God loves all creation. Because we all are created by God. And my favorite one from the 8th grade is, if only people were in heaven, it would be boring.
Amen.
Amen. So one of the things I've found...
People get a lot more interesting in heaven. How's that?
Yeah. One of the things I've found is I've gone with the vet several times, and we've had one of our pets pass several times, and it's not an easy thing to do. But there are some great prayers that you can use, and I put them in here so you have here's a wonderful prayer for a sick animal. Heavenly Creator, you made all things in your glory and made us caretakers of this creature. Restore it to health and strengthen this animal that you have entrusted to us. Keep this pet always under your loving protection. Blessed are you, O Lord, and holy is your name. Keep that prayer in mind. It's a great prayer. And then for a pet is about to die, so we can pray for them as well. And we won't read through it, but it's a lovely prayer. And so that's kind of the end of it. We can pray this prayer together. But does that make sense to you guys at all?
Yes.
Now you can argue the other way. You can argue the other way. You know, you can argue, for example, what about all the cows and the livestock and the food? But you know, we have free will, and that's our choice. You know, that's our choice. But the other thing is true. If you think about the diet of the ancients in Jesus' time, and particularly in the Hebrew Bible times, if you go back to 1446, when did the Exodus take place? 1446 BCE. And it ended in 1406, about 40 years later. And it probably was never that 600,000 plus people that were in the Sinai, probably a much smaller group. And archaeologists don't think there was ever that many, because there would have been a lot more remains, right? But if you think about the diet that ancients lived on, it was very high in starches, very high in vegetables, very, very low in protein. Matter of fact, when we read about, you know, when the prodigal son comes home and the father says to kill the fatted lamb, that was a big deal. They didn't have a lot of protein. It was really a rare occurrence. They would mostly eat plant foods, right? Matter of fact, what do we read when they're in the Sinai and they're lamenting about being in Egypt, and that wonderful line we read in Exodus, and Moses is saying to them, well, go shape up and stop complaining, Amy. And they say, oh, but the leeks, we missed the leeks. Remember that line? It's true. It's true. So anyway, that's anyway my perspective. There's a lot been written on this subject. Some of it's great fun, and it's a good conversation to have. Right? So how do you guys feel about that? Tell me. Talk to me. Yeah, Steph.
Well, if you look at the way man has developed from, if you believe that man came up out of the seas and then became four-legged and then two-legged and all this, we weren't terribly intelligent at the very beginning, and now I see that happening the more and more that people bring in dogs and cats. They seem to evolve into more human thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And I see this with my daughter's poodle, that I've learned to discipline this dog. They let the dog do anything, but when it comes to my house, he's disciplined. And when I go over there and he starts barking, I'll say, remember what I told you? And he'll stop right then and there and lie down by my feet.
Right.
So that shows to me the intelligence that these animals are beginning to create in their evolution. evolutionary process.
I remember when I did my field work with Father Leyland Jones at Ramona, which was pretty rural. It's out in Ramona. A lot of horses, Maya. And he would invite all the animals into church, just like Father Mark does, which is a wonderful thing to do, and we're going to do here in about half an hour. And that was horses, and horses would stick their heads in the windows. And, you know, never having done that before, I'm thinking, isn't that going to be a big problem? And he says, no, they're all very well behaved, even the cats. And I said, guess what?
They were.
They were.
They understood.
They understood.
Yeah.
They understood. So that's why we live in community with our creatures and love them, and why we're viewed as all of God's children. I have one apology to make. Somehow or other, the file got lost. So this is an older version of the file that's in here. This one's a little crisper. Okay, I have no idea where the file went when it was borrowed. But once you turn to page 2 and look at the bottom, that's the evil one. Can you believe that face? That's Teddy. That's Teddy. Nina was afraid to bring Teddy last night because Teddy has learned to do something, to howl at trumpets. Mark was playing the trumpet. You think he would like that, Maya? Maybe not. So what has Teddy done in his short couple of years? He's wiped out, we have several birdhouses on our property. He's wiped out several communities of sparrows. All right? He's depopulated the bunny population in the entire community of Escondido. He's a crow killer. Like I said, he snatches them out of the air. He's also an escape artist. He can get out of places in the property even though it's all fenced and screened. Okay? He howls at sirens when they go by, including trumpet players. Okay? And there's not a rat or a lizard that's safe on the entire property. And if he catches them, he brings them in the house and puts them on the couch. Yeah. And he disguises himself as being cute. And he has this little thing he does of throwing up in the car.
But you don't have gophers,
He's just
do
a
you?
perfect little ball of love.
Perfect little dog. So anyway, I hope you found this enjoyable. And we'll look forward to having everybody in church. What we're going to do is we'll have 2 communion stations in the front. We'll have 2 Eucharistic minister stations. And then we'll have 2 blessing stations. And last night, if you saw on Channel 8, we really did have a horse. Want to add anything, Chris?
No, just thank you very much. You'll hear kind of an intro in my little homily this morning, but I think I agree with Bill. And my take in it is to the extent that God is in creation, and God is in our pets, and that love that we receive from our pets is God, and so of course we'll be reunited with that love. So thank you, Bill, very much. That was wonderful.
Kind of fun.
Join us next week. We are going to have Father Noé from Haiti with us, and he is going to be talking to us about a new major ministry partnership this church is taking on, which is to build from scratch, a school in Haiti that will change people's lives. So join us next week for Father